Before I accepted my position at First Parish, my wife Nora and I met with a financial planner. We had recently adopted our sons and wanted to be sure that we were thinking carefully about the future and how we would provide for our family. Accepting the position at First Parish not only meant moving our family across the country from California to Maine, but also accepting a substantial pay cut. My starting salary at First Parish was less than my starting salary had been out of college 10 years earlier. We were looking for reassurance from our financial planner and an understanding on how to move forward. That's not what we got. Instead, what he told us was, don't move. Don't take the job. To say his assessment was upsetting is an understatement. I believed that responsible people make responsible choices, and as a result, they care for their family responsibly. The answer that came back from our financial planner was that making this move would be irresponsible. I was devastated. Nora and I had to make a choice: accept the values of financial planning as our guide, or to depart from what many consider good financial sense and to think differently, to embrace a different set of values to frame our experiences. And personally, I had to allow a different set of values to inform how I understood what it meant to responsibly take care of our family. This morning's story about Jesus in the temple is dramatic. I can imagine it as if it's a scene from a superhero action movie. Jesus comes upon the scene where he sees injustice, where he sees things going on that are not okay. And his anger starts to build within him until he just can't stand it. He forms a whip from cords and he whips and chases those who are selling offerings out of the temple. He turns over tables. This is not mild and meek Jesus. Presbyterian pastor and author Robert Koch says this about the passage: whereas we tend to get used to what Gail R. O'Day calls embedded realities in church and society, Jesus proclaims a radical vision of temple and society. He goes on saying, for example, our devotion to property values at the expense for affordable housing options seems to speak to this concern. The so-called tiny house movement seems to hold promise as a means of providing affordable housing for the insufficiently housed and unhoused. However, the initiative is getting pushback from established communities. One owner objected to a tiny house initiative in her community, saying, "I think tiny homes are great and people can enjoy them if they like, but please don't put them in our neighborhood. My home is my sanctuary and it's going to be destroyed by different thinking." Different thinking. By choosing to embrace a different set of values, Nora and I chose to destroy our understanding of financial security by embracing different thinking. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand that our decision did not change things. We did not change systems of injustice that are embedded in our society. But nonetheless, the decision was a start towards different thinking. Different thinking is critical. We must find ways to allow our understanding of God to compel us to think differently about the world around us. Jesus came to the temple and thought differently than the others about what he saw. And he didn't just reflect on that and go back to the disciples and give them a dissertation about what was wrong with going on at the temple. Instead, he acted. One of our challenges as people of faith is to examine the systems of our society and the privileges they ensconce from a countercultural angle, to consider them in light of our understanding of the gospel. And then once we do that, to find the courage to publicly turn over the tables. It's not enough to know something needs to change. We must also take action. Jesus reminds us of that this morning. This is Jesus showing us that confronting cultural values that create systems of injustice requires us to do something. And it reminds us that when we strive to live into God's values amidst the culture that surrounds us, the embedded culture, there is a cost. Not even Jesus escapes this. He challenges the embedded realities of his established culture, and eventually that leads to his death. What the authorities believe will be his final silencing, even though we know there was nothing final about Jesus' death. Action informed by different thinking is what is necessary to confront the injustice that is embedded in our systems and change them. The costs of such action are real. Accepting the job at First Parish had costs for our family, but it was no life-threatening decision, and it did little to confront the embedded systems that support injustice. So while it was difficult and required a good deal of faith to follow God here, I want you to know that I still struggle daily with following God, especially when it comes to acting against injustice and accepting the costs of that action. I'll leave you this morning with these questions posed by Marilyn Salmon, professor of New Testament at United Theological Seminary. Here are her questions. When does Christian faith lead us to challenge civil or cultural authority? When do secular laws or cultural norms compromise Christian values? What does it look like to follow Jesus in our own time and place? What unpopular decisions are required for us to walk in Jesus' ways? Amen.